Hi, I'm Celia Craig, and you're listening to Legends of Reed.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Legends of Reed. I'm so glad to have you on board, Celia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm really excited.
How are you doing today? Currently in Adelaide, right?
Yes, so I'm in Adelaide, and I've just finished a really exciting show for the Adelaide Festival, and the weather has changed completely. It was totally boiling hot when we started rehearsing, and now it's a little bit overcast. And I've just come back from Hobart, and I'm going back to Hobart next week, which is the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra, so I'm getting all sorts of weather.
Oh, that's quite exciting. I think our paths crossed briefly at the Mahido University last summer. Yeah.
Yes,
At
it
the
was lovely
IDRS.
in Bangkok.
Yeah. To begin with, could you tell us how did you start playing the oboe and the conch?
What I could say is I started playing the oboe almost completely by accident. I didn't even know what it was, but I was absolutely focused on becoming a professional violinist, and I'd been spending my entire life doing that. I'd been playing since I was 4 years old. But when I got to high school, I'd always played recorder for fun, and that is such a good basis for oboe that one day the music master gave me an instrument and he said, "Psst, would you like one of these?" And I opened the case. I didn't even know what it was, but I was able to get a sound out. And because of the recorder, I found oboe quite easy. So I eventually gave up the violin completely when I was 18, and I'd been playing the oboe literally just for fun, and I fell into it really. And the cor anglais is just a big version of that, isn't it? It's just like the special treat for oboists.
I see. So you were technically doubling on violin and oboe until you were 18?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And the problem with violin is that you have to do it for about 6 hours a day. I was literally getting up at about 5:30 in the morning, practicing from 6 till 7, going to school, practicing at school on the violin for 2 hours a day, then coming home and practicing for another 2 hours. That makes five, and that was a lot. And then fitting in the oboe in between. But when I went to specialist music school, I got a scholarship to the Purcell School in London. They said, "Why don't you focus on oboe full time?" And I think that was probably a very good idea.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very strenuous. So many skills to practice. Yeah.
Violinists just play. They have so much to do. Honestly, the oboe is easier in my opinion.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, wow. So, as an orchestral player, I think you have a very impressive resume. You have toured in 5 continents and you more or less have seen the world. So, how do you manage differences maybe in like cultural expectations or sound concepts? How do you approach that?
So, of course, there is a difference on whether you're in an orchestra and you have a job, therefore you're part of their culture, and then you tour the world, which is what I spent the first 30 years doing, maybe 25 years, I suppose it was. I was in London Orchestra, the BBC Symphony Orchestra at the end, also the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, the Bournemouth Symphony, and as a casual with the London Symphony. And in that case, the cultural expectation is you're going to bring your sound to the orchestra, and your sound is the one that they've chosen to fit for the job. And we would be doing a concert in Russia or Brazil, or it was all these different countries that we go to, but we're bringing our own sound there. Then, of course, I moved countries and I went to Australia, where the sound expectation is basically English, German, with a bit of French anyway. So it's European sound. And it would be different if you were auditioning for a job in a different orchestra. Right now, when I travel to Singapore, or when I played with the Thai Philharmonic as well in that conference, I'm just me. And so people are hiring me as me. That sound. Cultural differences is something you've got to be a little bit more careful with, because often it's got to do with dress, hasn't it? And whether you've got your shoulders covered how smart the audience might be. That's South America I was thinking of. They dress up for it. So we do all have to manage those cultural expectations really quite carefully.
I think it's very important. Yeah. What has been some of your most memorable concerts and why?
So you mean orchestral concerts?
Yes.
Yes, in the thrilling sound of a symphony orchestra when you're in it, I had got to the BBC Symphony Orchestra in London in the early 2000s, which was my dream, was to play in a London orchestra. And some of the most thrilling sounds that you get in the repertoire, for example, playing Daphnis and Chloe with Boulez on Boulez's 80th birthday. He was conducting That was one of the most memorable concerts that comes straight to mind. Anything in the Royal Albert Hall is amazing. The Bullows concert was actually in the Barbican, which is a beautiful place. And in the Barbican, I also played a concerto on cor anglais with the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which was by James Macmillan. And I would give anything to do that again. That was so amazing. I got incredible colours during it. We'll talk about that later. As a guest, going to Russia with the London Symphony Orchestra to play Shostakovich in St. Petersburg with Gergiev had to be a major highlight. It was absolutely amazing. And then I love touring. The touring in Barcelona was incredible. It was amazing. And I mustn't miss out Judith Weir's Oboe Concerto, which she's a master of the King's music. When she wrote that for me, it was lovely to play it with my own orchestra, Adelaide Symphony, who'd been the commissioners. But it was particularly amazing to go to England and to go to Wales and give the UK premiere there with my second orchestra, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, because it was live on the BBC and I felt like I was home. My family roots are in Wales. My children were born there and they were some of my colleagues in the orchestra. And then there I was playing Judith Weir's concerto. So that was also a memorable one in the Alan Hodinott Hall in Cardiff. I've been very lucky.
Just this morning, I was listening to that concerto. It was very striking, very, how do you say it, special. I thought it was very nimble.
It's a very beautiful and idiosyncratic piece, and its second movement is so gorgeous. And I'm very proud if you were listening to it on my record label. That's exciting too.
Okay. I know that you were chosen and you were mentored by the late maestro Leonard Bernstein. What was that like? It must have been quite an experience, right?
It was incredible, and I wish I could go back in time now and relive it. It was amazing, but then who wouldn't want to go back in time and meet Leonard Bernstein again? Everybody would. He was at the very end of his working life, and he'd said to all of us that he was dedicating the rest of his life to music education. So I realise now, in hindsight, he was founding Pacific Music Festival. It was the first Pacific Music Festival, still exists now. And technically I wasn't actually eligible because I'm not from the Pacific area. So the reason I got to do it was because he was president of the London Symphony Orchestra and LSO were the orchestra in residence, and he'd done worldwide auditions, and all these tapes and auditions and however they did it had all been made for the entire orchestra, but they decided to bring with them 2 oboists, 2 horn players and 2 cellists who were nominated by their teachers in London Symphony. So I was one of the lucky oboists. The other guy was a friend of mine called Alan Derbyshire. And what it meant was that we hadn't actually auditioned. We'd been nominated. So the important thing was that when we got to Japan, we had to be auditioned by Bernstein in a room by ourselves. So I did spend some time in a room just with me and Leonard Bernstein, with him asking me to play the Tchaikovsky 4 solo in one breath. He said, "Can you do it again without breathing in the middle?" Okay, so I managed that, and he was just really friendly to us. It was excellent. So his orchestral coaching was incredibly practical for a start. Just don't be late and you're a bit behind there, and think about answering this phrase and talk to that person there. It was a lot about communication. He seemed to have a really big heart, so generous and passionate in his conducting. So there's a famous picture of him conducting with a beautiful audience, clapping audience in the background, and he's holding his arms up like this. And I know that photo was taken when I just finished the solo in Francesca de Rimini, Tchaikovsky, and he was conducting, and the photographer, because I was sitting in the cor anglais seat, the photographer was sitting right next to me. So if you ever see that photo, I had this incredible feeling. If I'd gone back in time and been able to ask him about synesthesia, I didn't know he had that. I didn't know he saw colours as well. But anyway, I was a bit in awe of him, to be honest, and I was a bit nervous and everything, but looking back on it now, it was just an incredible experience. It really was.
Yeah, I'm curious. Did you watch the movie Maestro? What do you think about it?
I have actually just seen it, and I want to be a little bit careful what I say because people will probably have strong reactions, but I didn't like it. And it's really embarrassing because lots of people were saying how brilliant it was, so I thought it would be great to see it, but I don't know, it didn't seem as genuine as he really was to us. But maybe that's because it's supposed to be a behind the scenes type of a movie as well, but there seemed it was acting, wasn't it? And that was the thing. It's a movie, so they were acting, whereas for us he was more down to earth and more real, and really friendly and wasn't trying as hard. But then this was Hollywood and it was a movie. The filmmakers have to make a film that they're happy with, of course, and just day-to-day footage isn't really a movie, is it? So my experience was the day-to-day.
Yeah, I believe that he has this larger than life persona. The only thing I was thinking about was the cigarettes, right? That was this true? He always had a cigarette in his hand?
At the stage when I met him, he was at the very end of his life, and I've got a feeling that cigarettes played a part in that. So there were no live cigarettes around then in 1990. But I imagine if you'd just gone back a few years, it would have been exactly like that, I reckon. Yes, he was generous. There was one point where he made an announcement about what we should wear for the concert. It was like what kind of tie the men would wear. And some of the students were like, oh, no, but I haven't brought that one. And he said, never mind, I will buy everybody some ties. I'll buy them for you all. So big, generous gestures like that happened all the time.
Yeah, it's rare. I think it's one of those important figures in our industry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Could you tell us a little bit why you chose to leave the orchestra and move back to Adelaide?
Oh, just to clarify, the last orchestra was in Adelaide. So I've spent 10 years in the Adelaide Symphony, and I've decided to stay living here because it's a beautiful place to live. It really is. And the advantage of leaving my job also is that it means that there's been another opening for somebody else in Australia. I just don't like the idea of sitting on an orchestral job for a long time if it's not really what you want to do. And I've had 25, 30 years-ish of a big career. But that also means that the orchestral life, there's two things. One is that it's very noisy and it gets to your ears. And I'm not saying that hearing loss is necessarily the problem, but tinnitus. I find that the applause of orchestras, it's actually not the orchestra itself so much, but it's the applause in the halls, keeps ringing in my ears afterwards, and I just hate it because especially synesthesia that I have means that I see that applause, or that's like a white line going along here. I had this high white B going on for a long time. It's partly hearing preservation and to go back to a smaller, more intimate, single line to a part chamber music. That's also because it's such a much better sort of form of communication with each other, rather than just all sitting in a line like a classroom and looking at a conductor. You're looking forwards when you're looking at a conductor, and you're trying to make music with a bassoonist sitting right behind you who you're not allowed to look at. So actually, it's not my ideal music making forever. So I thought it was domestic as well. Now my children are old enough and have left school. I thought now's the time. I was always fascinated by recording companies, so I thought now's the time to start a recording company and start recording very small things that people would like to play, and it's just beautiful fun and it's great. So it's not an easy, isn't it? Not an easy pathway. A challenge is great. I'm really enjoying it actually. I've never been one to stay in one place for a long time, and I get bored quite easily.
Okay, yeah, because I saw that during the pandemic you actually recorded Britain's 6 Metamorphoses, right? Is this your label also? Yeah.
Yes, so forming my label, which by the way is called Artaria, and Artaria is the name of the publishing company which Beethoven sued to establish the principle of copyright. And that's part of my recording label. I've got a sort of ethical angle on it, that there are multiple streams of income that can be brought for musicians, including everybody who comes and plays on mine. So that would be royalties and publishing and music publishing and arranging and all these kind of things. I'm trying to understand those things. Apart from the sort of legal side of doing art, the copyright and on all the exciting things about releasing recordings, artistically, if you're an oboist, you can't avoid being obsessed by Britain's 6 Metamorphoses after Ovid for oboe. And because my dad was a singer that was involved with Britain's music, Britain seemed incredibly English, and I was missing home so much as well. And of course, it's socially distanced because there's only one person. So I wanted to record the Britain, but not just that, to bring a South Australian interpretational angle into it. Now, obviously, I'm going to play the piece as an English oboist, but I invited the former director of Adelaide Festival, Anthony Steele AM, to read Ovid, the sentences that Britain had chosen. And then I invited emerging Indigenous photographer to take a picture. His name is Finn Meller, to take portraits, but to create individual portraits of each character, and actually two, so that there was a transformation. So there's two Pans and there's two Bacchus, and we used South Australian locations. And I haven't really followed up on that enough as I would like to. We created the event, and that was great, but to share it to everybody. And then stage 2 of that was I commissioned a new South Australian piece, a new Britain Metamorphoses, so 6 new movements for solo oboe by the South Australian female composer Anne Cawse, Cawrse, and her piece is called Carmen Perpetuum, which is out of Ovid's Introduction to Metamorphoses. He says, "My endless song, I hope it will carry on." So that's what it means. So there's 6 more movements, and I recorded those side by side so that I could have a kind of female Australian perspective, opposite side of the world, just something to balance it with. So I'm very proud of that piece, and especially also having taken it to the Royal Academy of Music just now and got all the students to learn it as well. It's an excellent piece, and I recommend it to all oboists.
That's an excellent idea, that to balance both sides of having Britain and also the Australian composer, and also have the narrative and also imagery, right? All tied together. Yeah. Have you done it live also? Perhaps one day.
I haven't managed to put the entire project together live, because the thing you learn when you leave an orchestra, of course, is that you have to do all the organising yourself. And one only has 24 hours in every day, and then we assume we sleep on some of those. I haven't quite, but that's a project for the future. I would absolutely love to do that. I always want to do a visual with my things because I have the synesthesia going on. So I see pictures when I'm playing, usually. Not all the time, but when it's good.
I think, this wonderful quality that you have is synesthesia, right? Seeing music in colors. When did you discover that you could see music in colors?
I can remember it really well when it started. And the funny thing is that when you're having synesthesia, you feel as if you're totally in the moment. You will never forget this moment. It's like perfection suddenly. And the first time I did that, I was 3.5. Just before I started the violin lessons, which was my 4th birthday. When I was about 3.5, I was having some music lessons, probably some sort of kindergarten thing, I can't remember. And I remember somebody played the piano, and I don't have any synesthesia with middle C on the piano or a C chime bar. C is just normal, fine. But I can remember them moving away and playing a B or a D, and I was flooded with colour. I was like, whoa, what happened? It was like somebody had turned coloured lights on. And so I realised that everybody's synesthesia is different, and people associate their own colours with their own pitches, and it's logical in your head. So the way my synesthesia is developed is exactly the way I think it should be. I can't imagine anything different. And it's very rare to talk to anybody else who has the same colours. You can find a lot of synesthetes. It's good. We just don't talk about it very much. That's another reason, leaving the orchestras, that's another reason why I've done it, because I wanted to recapture more synesthesia. I felt that I might have been losing it a little bit in the orchestra, because maybe it's surprise. That surprise of hearing something new and hearing something very exciting is what kind of sets it off in your brain. I was afraid that I was losing it slightly and I should do something a bit more because maybe I've played the same pieces too many times. So now I do a primary schools program with electric guitar in which we improvise a lot. And it's all about synesthesia, and it's about colours. We usually have we have a rainbow umbrella behind us, and we twirl it round, and the kids choose a colour, and then we improvise on the colour with electric guitarist Casper Hawksley. I absolutely love doing that because we often identify little kids at school who've never told anybody else that they see colours. So, for example, we did one tour with 3,000 children we played to, and we found 4 synesthetes, which is about the average population number. It is actually totally normal. It's completely probably irrelevant. I don't think it means much itself. It's just one of those things. I don't know, some genetic or natural thing that develops. But the important thing is not to get bullied about it being weird. And I'm afraid that did happen to me quite a bit, which is why I basically didn't talk about it until I was over 50. And then I thought, now I'll start talking about it and find other people and try and help little kids at school who might be not telling people. And in fact, we found one girl who was in some sort of locked-in syndrome. And when we asked anybody, did anybody see any colours during that particular piece, she brought out all the same colours as me, which is so special. I loved it. It was marvellous. And she was 9.
Oh, that's so lovely. I think the idea of connecting with people and then being different is okay. I think that's spreading a very important message, right? For diversity.
Actually, diversity
Yeah.
and mental health, because it's all going on in your brain, and
Yeah.
synesthesia itself is very highly linked to ADHD. At the moment, I'm doing some research, which I'll probably talk about later if we get a chance. But the research that I'm doing is on a particular composer, a lady from Adelaide, and she had synesthesia too, but people don't really report on that. So she wrote about it, and I want to write about it. And one of the things she wrote was, "My brain is very excitable." So the excitable brain, you suddenly get these sparks of colour. Sometimes they're like fireworks or swirly smoke going past or clouds like this. It's just so beautiful. And I think in that case, music could really be linked with a mental health moment.
Mhm.
Everybody can sit there and enjoy their moment of peace and the flow. And maybe it's more than just trying to get people to come to concerts with their programs and clap politely. It's actually about an experience.
Yeah, I think it's very common now. People are going for sound baths as a way of, how to say, meditation. People are listening to different things, crystals, right, sound bowls. So I
Yes,
think
very.
people are more open to this. I think healing vibrations, right?
And at the same time, the pace of modern life and the amount of disruptions and distractions and noise pollution that there is, for me, I see most of it. And so I was getting really distracted by the fact that I had to walk into a certain area of the city where it's very noisy. Then I had to go into a studio that didn't have a very nice, not a great acoustic. And then there were all these sounds going on all the time. And then you'd leave and there'd be somebody with a digger or a dust cart outside. And so just to have a break from that and be able to focus on music and colour and relaxation, it's just, yeah, I think it's more and more needed these days because we're all stressed and burnt out, really.
I think it's just too much technology these days. For example, do you think that seeing music in colors helps you get into the flow state? Does it help with improvisation?
100%. Absolutely. Flow and improvisation. That's what I'm looking for. And of course, I can't be the one that goes off into an improvised solo in the middle of a Tchaikovsky symphony. So I have to find another forum for doing that, which with Casper and Musica Viva in schools, our program's called Colours of Home, I get to play that. I love the fact that our improvisations in the school, it's like a mental health massage for me when somebody picks a colour and the umbrella and it's purple and then we really get into F. The colour of the umbrella purple that we've got actually makes me want to play F minor. So I always say to Casper, oh, it's marvellous F minor sort of moments. But we do a different thing every time and he surprises me, which gives me more synesthesia. So yes, you have to be in flow. And you see, orchestrally, the concerts that I remember, when you asked me what were the concerts I particularly remember, of course they were the ones where I got the colours. And that's not all the time. And that's the conductor and your colleagues and the acoustic and the piece, of course, the music. For example, playing Sibelius, the Swan of Tunella, with Joseph Svensson conducting once at the proms with the BBC National Orchestra Wales. I remember everything was green. It was just all green. And because the A minor is always green anyway, I was in flow, so I managed to miss out a breath. And for the choreography players out there, it's just, you know how exciting it is. If you feel like you're flying and you don't need to breathe and everything's perfect. So that's the kind of synesthesia flow state I'm trying to get. So when we go into a school and we play into a little primary school and the kids come back with drawings of rainbows and say, I felt so relaxed, I was sleepy, I loved it. That's a goal. That's a really beautiful audience.
Okay, so for example, if you were to think of E major, what color comes when you listen to E major?
100% orange. E major has
Oh,
always been orange. It's a bright orange and it's such a warm colour because in my colours it's keys. You said E major, which was great, rather than just E, because E by itself could be in any context, couldn't it? It could be any E, but E major, marvellous. And then for me, such a warm colour because it's basically orange, but I have little bits of the B and the G sharp, and a G sharp is sort of bright orange as well. So everything's warming up the colour. And as soon as you go from E to E flat, for me, it gets all copper and silver copper with just the beautiful kind of, it's a texture as well, but the beautiful kind of shininess you get in E flat. It's so exact that a couple of friends of mine that I taught synesthesia with, when you're not just, for example, you might say red, but you're like red mohair blanket or black charcoal, because we feel that we know you could just almost reach out and touch it.
Wow. Okay.
I was just going to say massive, strong emotions attached with it as well, which is another reason it's got a mental health connection as well. So sometimes synesthesia can be really depressing, but mostly it's really exciting.
Oh, wow. I want to be part of your secret club now.
I want to start a secret club. I've had a plan for it. It's going to be called Sparks.
We interrupt this interview to bring you a message from our sponsor. Legends of Reed is sponsored by Barton Cane. Barton Cane is your stop for quality double reed cane. Their cane is processed with precision equipment completely designed by them. Your days of saying no to happy hours are over. Use coupon code Legends of Reed, all one word, for free shipping on any order. Take back your life with Barton Cane. And let's get back to the interview right now. Oh, I don't have it, but I have perfect pitch. I'm not supposed to say it out in public. People don't like
That's
it.
I actually don't. I don't have perfect pitch, and it's a bit of an adjustment sometimes to play in Baroque pitch. But actually, synesthesia is much stronger in Baroque pitch when you're in unequal temperament and everybody's tuning really carefully and the harpsichord's carefully tuned. I absolutely love it. But I use my memory for pitch itself. I don't have that absolute pitch that some friends of mine do, and sometimes it makes their lives quite difficult. The only way in which synesthesia has made my life difficult is through interruptions, loud bangs, strobe, which I can't stand. That's the other thing about playing in an orchestra. If they do a strobe gig, you just have to do it, but it's like a nightmare for me. I'm like, no, please. I can't look at that. And also the tinnitus thing, if it happens, if I'm hearing another, then I've got this horrible line going across and I hate it.
I see. Okay. For example, like Poulenc's sonata for oboe, do you also hear any colors?
Oh, yes. Recording that was really good because I got to play with this marvellous pianist, Constantine Chamray. Fantastic. So even though piano itself doesn't give me synesthesia as much, I have to say, because of the equal temperament that piano is, I don't find any of the chords massively in tune. But of course, the way that people play it helps a lot. So with Poulenc's sonata, the first movement is basically lots of red. Oh, I don't know if I'm singing the right note, but the G. And then the best bit, actually, is that beautiful inner heart moment of the second movement, where you get these fantastic tunes, and they're quoting Prokofiev because it's dedicated to Prokofiev. You get these beautiful slow phrases coming back in various keys, and each one is a different colour. There's a beautiful purple one, and then it goes up a semitone, it goes to lilac, and then the D-flat major is all sorts of flowing shades and things. I've tried to write about what colours I see sometimes, blog on my website, and I've described 3 orchestral pieces. One is the Tallis Fantasia for strings, which is when I was a violinist where I'd get the most synesthesia. Just, beautiful reds, and it's just gorgeous, like sort of clouds. Then I also wrote about Beethoven's 7 when I went to a concert and I got into some sort of trance, and so I thought I'd write down what I was seeing. Embarrassingly, though, lots of people in the audience knew me because it was Adelaide Symphony and I was in the audience, and I looked as if I was texting, and I absolutely wasn't texting people during that. I was writing down on my notes, and when I looked back later, the things I'd written, like a snaky green bass line and then flashes of gold appear and things like this, I don't even remember writing them. I was in some sort of trance. And so the last piece I wrote about was Elgar's Symphony No. 1, which is a very long story. Let's say I had a Queen's Gambit moment. Have you seen that program about chess? And you know how she's looking at coloured plans on the ceiling when she's imagining her chess moves? I ended up once playing Elgar's Symphony by reading my colour map off the ceiling instead of the music. Because I was more than slightly, I was in shock. I'd actually been dragged out of the audience to play on stage. I've written a blog about it. You can hear. I could tell you the whole story, but it would be quite long. But just say I was sitting in the audience, not expecting anything, live broadcast, and then suddenly I was on stage in about 5 minutes with somebody else's instrument, wrong fingering system because I'm a thumb plate player, and my brain just went into some sort of colourful meltdown overload shock. But I played. I got all the notes in the right place because they wouldn't have been able to have their broadcast without the chord player. I know that.
Oh my goodness. You hear of stories, but this is really special.
I was just going to say, somebody asked me, have you got your phone on? After the interval, they'd just nudged me and said, have you got your phone on? And it was somebody I knew, and I turned around and said, of course I haven't. This is a live broadcast. I'm a professional. I'm sitting in the audience, phone's off. And they said, think you should turn it on. And there was a guy on the stage like this, pointing at me, going, phone. Unusual moment, yes, and I was really in shock. Your brain is dealing with a lot of stuff when you're in shock.
Yeah, okay. There's a joke, right? If your phone rings, you're supposed to go and play the bassoon, not the oboe.
Yes. That has happened before when we've had some colleagues throwing up and things like that. But anyway, luckily, not very often.
I'm wondering if you could possibly expand the concept for adults, maybe with the use of AI generated art
for Chamberworks. That is basically my next project. That's what I would like to do. And I was looking into AI generated, but it's really complicated and expensive. And there'll be a computer somewhere burning itself to try and make the AI. I have done concerts with the iTunes visualizer, and they were actually for adults, older adults, these concerts, and they were looking at the screen and the pictures that were being generated by the pitches, and they were, wow, this is amazing. So if I could get a bit better with technology, that is what I'd like to do. I'd like to do a concert in the dark with coloured videos around, but the videos, instead of being pre-made, they should be generated by the pitches of the music. And that would be my life's dream come true if I could make that.
Yeah, that would sound like an absolute trip, I think.
Yeah, it's very trippy. Yes,
yeah,
it's so exciting.
Okay, I know you have done a lot, you've accomplished a lot. You set up your own record label, you premiered concertos, commissioned composers. What do you do in your free time to unwind and relax away from music?
It depends who you're talking to there. If you talk to my in-laws, they'll say there is none, because they're noticing that I'm very driven by music. But because for me music and colour is linked, the biggest relaxation I could give myself is photography. I just love it. I just can't stop it. My granddad was a professional photographer, really good photographer. I know how quality he was, but he wasn't. He was working for the RAF, so some of the flying. So some of the army things that were done, we're not allowed to know exactly what it was, but he did teach me how to take photos. So honestly, that's my best thing. You won't find me in a gardening because I'm hopeless at gardening. In fact, I've just sold the entire garden and got a house with no garden. So basically, it's photography, exercise, swimming, which is like having synesthesia anyway. Bit of exercise, although I have to say that exercise isn't necessarily relaxing, but I should probably find more hobbies. Drawing is another one. I like creative things because it's when your brain can just turn off and go its own way instead of being timetabled into what you have to do next.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When ideas drop, you can't force the moment, it just comes, right? I think, yeah, it's just catching fairy dust, I think. Yeah. I read a bit of your blog. It seems that your philosophy is to try to innovate the classical music industry and break barriers between audiences and performance. What have you done to try to fulfill that?
In the last few years, since I've been doing more chamber music, with my trio, which is oboe, cello and piano, we have deliberately tried to pioneer an exclusive musical soiree, we've called it. It's an intimate concert format where the audience sit really close to us. And you'll be in a small room, say there's 50 people, 70 people max, that sort of thing. And the audience can actually see the musicians. For a start, we introduce the pieces and we say why we like them. And we're talking not in a formal way, but in an informal way, just saying what drives us in this performance and what drove the composer in his or her piece, what was in the context, what they were thinking about. I should just say that started because I was the resident artist of the National Trust of South Australia. And so I realised that rather than just simply having a new concert series, they might want to put in appropriate music into buildings that have an amazing interior, because that's what National Trust is preserving, beautiful old buildings. So then I started programming pieces in the context of this room. You're sitting in this room, you're listening to this piece. Why am I programmed this piece? What would this composer think? And they get to people get to see, especially if we sit in the round, they get to see how we're interacting with each other and how each performance is a bit different. There's been a big survey I read about recently that said that they've now proved it, that live music is more beneficial to people's brains and listening than recorded music. And It was in the New Scientist. I read it on the plane the other day, and they were saying in this article that the power of live music is really important to people. Now, we know that, but I felt that one thing that they'd really missed out of this thing, that apparently the audience had a better feeling when it had been live music, but also what they missed out there was it was the power of the performer to gauge the audience and to decide if they want to play a little bit faster or slower or more relaxed. That indefinable thing about live performance is one of the things I've been trying to innovate. And I also felt very strongly that we should do more videos of people playing real music in real time, because it's harder and harder to see people playing things close up. When I was at school, we used to have posters all over the walls with a picture of somebody playing the oboe and a picture of somebody playing the flute. But I don't think those things happen so much anymore now. And of course, YouTube is so accessible. During the pandemic, we all switched to online things. But also, from my film recording background, some of my most memorable moments have been at Abbey Road Studios or at Air Studios in London or at Trackdown Studios in Sydney. And you'll know that in the room aesthetic of how somebody played a solo and everybody else just, wow, that was amazing. You don't get credited for that on the score of the film. People just go in and listen to it and they're like, yeah, that was lovely music. So I wanted to break that barrier down and unmask some of the people behind the scenes, because it actually reduces me to tears sometimes. I'm in Australia, I'm watching a film and I know who's playing the flute or I know who's playing the violin. I'm not saying I know every player on everything, but if it was recorded in London, I usually do have an idea who it was. And they don't get enough credit for the amazing skill and that nuanced moment, that special moment that they've chosen to put on the film there. That was in the skill of the performer.
I think it's really hard work. I think I have a friend who plays in Abbey Road Studios, and yeah, they work really hard. And usually they don't get the music beforehand, right?
Yes, it's all sight readings. I recently caught up with a former colleague of mine from London Symphony Orchestra days, a little while ago now, the wonderful flautist Karen Jones. And if you look her up, she describes about how she had to sight read the flute solo in Prisoner of Azkaban with John Williams. And they used take one, I think. That's what it sounds like. Take one or two from what she's saying. She just got it right. Because British players are famous for their sight reading, of course. And that is something that's required in film studios. It's also it's risky, so that's exciting. I don't want to listen to a safe performance that's been rehearsed to every single nuance and that's exactly how it's going to be every time. I want to have somebody surprising me.
Oh, that palpable feeling, right? Something is happening. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Why do you think it's important to have a strong independent art scene? Because I'm an independent artist myself, so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this? How can arts bodies help encourage this community and scene?
I have actually found here locally, Arts South Australia is our sort of most common arts funding body, and I had to go to them and say, look, I was employed for nearly 30 years and now I'm an independent artist. It's a whole new language of things to learn about how to apply for grants for a start. But they were really helpful to me, but I think that's because I asked for the help, because I'm a bit unusual, being of a certain age and an independent artist and never doing it before. So I was bold enough to go and say, look, I need some help here. I think that when people are in music colleges and learning music, my experience of teaching is that quite often you have to follow the syllabus. And if you have any input, like, for example, how is this independent artist going to market themselves? How are they going to decide what is the most important thing for themselves to do? How are they going to make a budget? Those things could really be taught more. I'm getting on a bit now. So my experience in music education, I'm sure it's all changed. But for me, it was all about playing your scales, playing your pieces, do it again with a nice sound. Here's how you make a reed. That was basically, and that should be the most important thing to focus on, of course, when you're doing music. But all those other bits that are so necessary, and they will make, tax returns go much better. But particularly also career planning. I feel that people could have their eyes opened a lot. There's a lovely lady here in Australia who runs a company called Notable Values, and she helps independent musicians set, for example, their SMART goals. Now, what is SMART? I don't get it right. It's got to be specific, measured, accurate, realistic, and something. Not just probably, yes, I'm sure.
Tangible, yeah.
Not just, I want to record something. And so she sat me down and said, so what do you actually want to do? And I said, I want to bring out a CD by this time of this repertoire. And of course, it's gone on from CDs. Everything's downloadable now. But in my experience previously, music education hadn't really included those sort of career goal-setting things. So to have somebody that helps you plan where your career might go next, what's actually realistic, what skills you have as a musician that could be useful in other ways, like the entrepreneurial thing of starting a podcast like you've done. We don't get taught that. You're just, maybe we don't, but you've just done it, which is, you definitely need a spirit of optimism and excitement to found something new. The feeling that you're doing something useful is helpful.
I think it started from my time playing in the Holland Festival. They had the Save the Bassoon campaign. So so I was inspired by the Dutch campaign. So that's how I started the podcast, actually. Yeah.
That's very interesting too, because when I was chairman of the BBC Symphony Orchestra at about 2000, we were spearheading the government's endangered species campaign. And so that's the point where they said basically oboe, bassoon, viola, French horn, double bass, I think it was, will be supported because they do need a bit of extra support. I mean, they're the sort of the hidden instrument. Not for us, because we're in a double reed community and you're doing legends of reeds, so you're talking about reed, but for the general public.
Yeah, I think we're odd species.
Yes, and as an ex-violinist, I didn't even know what those woodwind players were doing over there in orchestras. I had no idea. I didn't even know what they were called. I thought the bassoon gave the A. Admittedly, I was about 6 when I started playing an orchestra, so I probably couldn't say or even carry a bassoon at the time. But it is a bit of a mystery across the orchestra, and I'm sure that's why double reed societies have to exist, and I feel very strongly about them. My teacher was president of the BDRS in Britain. I was president of the ADRS for 7 years. IDRS, where you and I met, IDRS is really important, and Sarah Roper's doing a marvellous job there now. Because quite often you end up putting on events for somebody who's the only oboist in their school. And somebody who's got a bassoon and they've got no idea, there's nobody else around them to play it. So connecting players is good, we know that.
I think it could be like, as you say, breaking the walls. You don't have to feel isolated. There are more people like yourself into these nerdy things. So if you could impart one message to young musicians, what would you say?
So are you saying to people who are young musicians who are just starting to learn, or people who could learn an instrument but haven't yet?
So young musicians that maybe they're still studying in conservatory and thinking about the future and all
Yes,
this.
excellent. Yeah. To that cohort of musicians, you're going to set off on a lifetime of playing your instrument. And if you can find a really relaxed and easy way of doing it, obviously do all the good technique, but don't start. Because it's going to be part of your life and actually part of your identity. And it would be really good if that was a supportive and useful and not a negative part of your life in any way. So if you find that you're getting very stressed about one particular area, like making reeds or tonguing fast or something like that, it's marvellous to go and actively seek out somebody who's a mentor who may be able to help you. In my experience, if you go to somebody and say, I think you're particularly good at this, I was wondering if you could give me some advice. Most people are flattered and they like it. But specifically to look at yourself and to focus on what issues are really annoying you and try and sort them out. Because things only get worse. Honestly, they only get magnified, let's say. Not necessarily worse, but you can't underestimate how important it is to try and play in a relaxed and flow state. The flow state that I'm looking for, it can't happen if you're tense. If you're tense or miserable or scared or worried or anything, it won't happen. That's why you've got to be really brave and take that risk to just achieve a performance. That's the music plays itself, and that's what I want to do. But to do that, you have to be ever so relaxed, keep focusing on your posture. It's an ongoing battle for all of us. But also where your mind's going, what are you thinking about? Are you fully present? I've just recently done the Counselling Foundation course for Guildhall Ignite. And Guildhall, being Guildhall School of Music and Drama, they've used their musician skills to then develop into counselling. And of course, counselling is, or coaching, let's say, it's the same thing really in some ways. The coaching is basically like teaching, but also it's reflecting on yourself and whether you're bringing your entire self to what you're doing. And you're not thinking about something else miles away, while you're thinking, oh, I hate remaking it. So just focusing calmly on what you're doing.
Yeah, that's very
really important. I've got one other top tip if you want it, because it's been the most useful thing that I've done in my oboe life. Really, I think it is the most useful thing, is that when you end up giving the A or playing a long note, warming up, say, but particularly if you're a principal oboe and you're giving the A, I try and make sure that when I do long notes, the longer they are, the more I've got time to focus on my posture and breathing. And so that during the note, you can get taller and get more relaxed. And it's now become a habit, which is good, because in Adelaide they have 4 A's. And so you play an A lot. And it's actually a little warm-up for yourself that's really good for you. But I found that it can become a habit quite quickly. So I was really pleased with that habit developing.
Okay, that's interesting, I think, for all listening in.
Great before an audition, for example. Focus on that one note and think about your posture and just play the one note, and not, it's too late to do all the really difficult excerpt practice. Just focus yourself and be really zen.
Just one note and think about your posture. Yeah.
And think about your posture as the physical thing. And then if you want to carry on playing long notes for a little while, which is incredibly good for you, obviously think about your breathing in and your support. But then you work on the sound. Am I doing a straight note? Am I doing a vibrato note? Is it a vibrato supported note? What kind of colour would I like to make that note? It's just a little mindful practice, like that little habit that people have of, sometimes they get you to eat a raisin and then you have to think about what it's like, the taste of it and the texture and everything. So I'm just trying to do that kind of mindful practice, but on one note. And of course I choose the colour of the note. If I'm not given the A, then I get to choose a better colour.
How about practicing in the dark? Would it help?
I love practicing in the dark. In fact, when we did the Poulenc CD and a couple of concerts together, Constantine and I spent quite a lot of time performing or rehearsing in the nearly dark, not the utter complete dark, that'd be we'd just fall over and break our reeds, but really a darkened room, because he said I can hear better then, and I was like, me too, this is marvellous. I feel like when your other senses are less, assaulted by electric light and different noises and things, so I think practicing in the near dark. And the most amazing thing is having a big room in the near dark. I was lucky when I was in Hobart just now that I was the first person in the Federation Concert Hall in Hobart. They've got a beautiful concert hall, and I'm very fond of it because I adjudicated Hobart City Stedford for a week, so I got to see all different community groups in that. So I know where I'm going in that hall because I spent a while in it, and I managed to turn nearly all the lights off, so you can really hear what you're doing.
Wow. Okay. All right. So unfortunately, the interview has to come to an end. What are some of your upcoming plans and projects you're excited about?
Thank you. I'm most excited about being the Creative Arts Fellow at the National Library of Australia this year. And my particular area of research is on the, originally from South Australia, Adelaide-born composer Miriam Hyde. She was a virtuoso pianist who went from Adelaide to the Royal College of Music. And she got this scholarship to play piano at Royal College of Music, where she was a student alongside Benjamin Britten. So I'm really interested in her because she wrote a lot of chamber music. She wrote a lot of letters, and it turns out she had synesthesia. So she was describing her feelings about sunsets and snow, because she'd never seen snow before, and really writing home a lot of letters. So we've got lots of stuff and music from that time, including some unpublished trios, which I'm going to do with my trio, Tarawada. So I'm not exactly sure what the outcome's going to be of that. I'm going to be in Canberra for a month. And it's one of those marvellous projects when they just say, you research and you decide what you want to do. That's, who knows where that will lead exactly. But I want to change the image that Australia has of her, because when she moved to Sydney, like many women in music, she then had to decide what to do when she had kids and a husband, and she was a mum, and she decided to start writing piano music for little children to help them develop, like I'm doing with Colours of Home. I'm not necessarily writing the music, but encouraging young children. And therefore, she got pigeonholed as an old lady who wrote music for young children. And that is totally not what she was like in 1932. And the trio, we've already looked at these unpublished manuscripts, so we're going to get a good edition of them and play together. That will be fun. Also, her early fantasy trio. If many people know about Britain's Fantasy Oboe Quartet, that's because the Royal College of Music had a fantasy competition. It's a one-movement piece that was like a Renaissance English style. She wrote a fantasy trio. It was actually for violin, cello and piano, but, oboists need more repertoire, so I'm going to nick it.
Yeah, congratulations on this wonderful opportunity. And thank you so much for your time and input. It's been lovely. I didn't expect a podcast to come to such a length, but it was really nice to talk to you here.
You're welcome. Please have a look on the blogs or the website or Artaria's YouTube channel, and then you won't have to have me talking so much. I get very excited about my work. Thank you for having me on.